What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. This is your weekly reactor hunt video. I make one of these every week on Tuesdays, since on Tuesdays the game essentially resets where certain reactors can drop from specific missions and activities. This changes every week on Tuesday, and so therefore we have new missions, new areas where we can spot or target from specific reactors. This video covers the 12th until the 19th of November, and as I said, I make one of these every week. However, I did skip last week due to some technical issues, and it ended up being a pretty damn good week for reactors. That cannot be said for this week. The slim pickings for this week are definitely there, and there are not a lot of great options for us for reactors this week, but we're going to look at them regardless. Now, that being said, how do I compile this information? Pretty much what we could do is we can create a list like this. This is essentially every single descendant in the game and what can be considered their best in slot reactor. And then we can also refine that list into something like this, which basically shows us that certain descendants can use the same or should use the same reactors as other descendants. Like for example, Izumo and Lepic both use fire and tech, so when you are farming for Lepic, you are technically speaking also farming for Izumo. Of course, your substats may vary. Now, how you find this in the game is also super easy because all this information is made available for us. You can simply go to your map, you can open up difficulty level rewards, which is F on PC, and you are presented with this screen here. Basically, then you feed in your choices of reactor here, and it spits out locations that you could potentially find this week, and you can see the amount of time that's left for you to essentially farm that this week. So using my previous example, let's say for example you wanted to use something or find something for Lepic or Izumo, you would go fire and you would go tech, and you'd see, okay, cool, I got Misty Woods, and basically any of the activities that you do in this area would essentially have a higher chance of dropping those reactors. Now, for our first reactor this week, we can find something for Freyna. So if you are looking for a Freyna reactor that has a general rounds mounting, then you should be farming this week, since there's a pretty decent spot for you to do this. Now, of course, general rounds are like, for example, Enduring Legacy, but of course there are many other great choices of general rounds weapons like Thunder Cage, Python, and the list goes on. So this is sort of like a really good idea for you to have this. It's not what I would consider best in slot. Definitely Secret Garden is up there, but it's good to have as a backup for you to be able to deal damage. And always Enduring Legacy mountings are very, very welcome, especially considering now these days that we are able to actually map different weapons onto reactors. We can imprint different weapon types, or rather different ultimate weapons onto reactors, which is a feature that was added a while back. So that's really good. Now for Freyna, you want toxic mechanics, right? Because her best skills, or her skills that deal damage, are all toxic tech. As you can see here, toxic tech, toxic tech, toxic tech. So toxic mechanics is what you want. And if that is what you're into this week, I've got good news for you. If you go to toxic and you choose tech, then it's going to give you 4 areas that you can farm. But specifically what we are looking for is Converter Facility. That's general rounds. Yes, you can go do Fallen Arc, but I wouldn't advise it. None of these missions are very lucrative, yet you could be lucky. The idea is that I usually suggest activities that are highly repeatable, spit out a huge amount of reactors, and oftentimes give you other things as well, like character XP, weapon proficiency, gold, and Kuiper. So in this case, keeping that in mind, Converter Facility is really good for us this week, because Converter Facility has an outpost in it that you can basically farm in the Valby method, if I can call it that way. So those of you familiar with, let's call it like the earlier stages of this game, there was a farm that you could essentially do with Valby, which was very, very lucrative. It revolves around essentially doing the outside ring of an outpost, and then the boss spawns in the middle, and then instead of killing the boss, you actually kind of like kite him and avoid dealing damage to him and just kill all the enemies that spawn. It gives you about 2.5 minutes of unstoppable killing with these enemies. It gives decent XP, decent weapon proficiency, gold, and Kuiper, plus a shitload of reactors fall out of these enemies. My advice to you when you are building your Valby is, of course, to make sure not to equip any modules that increase the size of the water pool that you leave behind, and also to possibly just monitor your damage and not stack too much damage on in terms of modules, since you only really need to be killing the rank and file enemies, and those can be killed almost by a basic water trail, not with any augments on it. So definitely mess around with your modules a little bit and figure out what the best way is for you to put it together. But once you have that going, you can do this over and over and over, and you're probably going to end up with a bunch of reactors, and hopefully some of them are sexy. Then if you are a person that likes Sharen, and by the way, it's highly likely that she is the next ultimate descendant that we're going to get, if some of the hints that the developers have been dropping is anything to go by. But that being said, if you are a fan of Sharen and this week you are looking for a reactor 4 with a special weapon mounting, now that's of course weapons like Clairvoyance, Secret Garden, Greg's Reverse Fate, so there we go, Secret Garden, so on. So these are always in super high demand. Special rounds reactors are really good because they have decent weapons in them, namely Secret Garden and Greg's. Let's not talk about Clairvoyance all that much. That being said, Sharen is generally considered a weapon descendant, so if you build her, your reactor choice doesn't really matter as much as your substats do. However, if you do plan on building Sharen to capitalize on like the damage that you can get from Void Domination or that you can get from Cutoff Beam, then you're looking for an electric fusion reactor. That looks something like this. So it's a tingling mixture reaction because that gives you electric and fusion skill power boost. So in this case, if you're looking for something like that this week, got good news for you. We can go over here and we can say electric and we can say fusion. And that's going to give us two areas. The special rounds area, Mirage Stone, is the one that we're looking for. And just like the previous farm that we just spoke about for Freyna, this has an outpost in it, which can also be done in the Valby way. Now, what I said before absolutely still counts true. It's exactly the same thing. Equip your Valby in a way that you are able to not increase the size of your water dropping behind you ability, your water trail, but also just increase the damage just enough to be able to one-tap all the enemies that spawn, and you're good to go. By the way, you can also do this with Bunny if you're so inclined. So maybe if you don't have Valby or your Valby is not leveled up, this can also be done with Bunny by not equipping obviously high voltage, but essentially just also making sure that you make your third ability's size as small as possible, and you can also just kite the edge. What is important though is not killing the boss, and you can obviously in certain situations just stop on the other side of the outpost and pop a couple of shots in him and make him wander back into the middle if he seems to go into your path that you are running, and you're good to go. And that's going to give you a decent amount of character XP, some weapon proficiency, golden Kuiper, plus it's going to spit out a bunch of reactors, and hopefully you get some decent reactors in there for your Sharen with a nice special mounting on, like for example some Secret Garden. And that's it for the video, guys. I was not joking. This is not a great week for reactors. There aren't really any good choices otherwise. It's not to say that you can't find these reactors by just doing missions somewhere else and getting lucky. Of course, you can absolutely do that, but I tend to show like what I would consider the most lucrative activities that you can do to get as many of these reactors. This week might be a week that you should concentrate on things like maybe leveling up your favorite weapons or your favorite descendant instead of reactor hunting. That being said, as always, fucking cheers.